Alright, my dear pamplets, get around the fireplace. Grab some tea while you're at it. And what kind of story would you like to hear tonight? Ghost stories? No, we don't have anything like that around here. We do have the story of Jacob, but that's about as close as you'll get. You really want to know? Well, I'm not supposed to tell you though. But alright. Just no interrupting. I don't have the patience for it. How to describe Jacob Emory? Well, I guess you could say he was the kind of guy you could never take notice of. This isn't to say he was a bad kid, in any sense. Many people in this town thought he was the most reliable person for an odd job in the state, but he never really excelled in anything. He was a living proof behind the statement, "Jack of all trades, ace of none." Most of this was due to his lack of will. He dabbled in damn near everything this town could offer him. Automobiles, radio operation, store management. His friends and workers went after about it a number of times, but everybody got the same unsatisfying response. It just wasn't enough. Needless to say, any friends he kept were either very patient or never spoke of the matter altogether. It was probably inevitable, then, that Jacob would leave to get aboard. I don't remember where he went, but I think Gertrude, down the street, knew before she passed on. You'll have to scout someone else if you ever get curious. In any case, no one ever tried to stop him. Everybody thought that a little travel would stamp the ambition out of him, or else feed it until it was no longer an issue. Hell, we even gave him a sending off party, which I thought was pretty nice of everybody. So, anyway, he was gone for 6-7 years? Can't remember. You'll have to check with someone else about that, too. Anyways, he came back, eventually. And he had changed, obviously enough. He was amiable, energetic, all smiles all the time. And we all quickly learned why. He showed us a souvenir he brought back. A solid black stick. The length of a pencil, but the texture of chalk. We all wondered why on earth such a simple thing would prompt such a spring in his step. Until he gave his demonstration. He took a piece of paper and with a stick. God, there's got to be a better word for it with this stick. He drew a crude circle. It dropped and rested on the border of the paper, like a stone. It didn't leave the paper, but it attracted out on it. Sort of like an old movie projector on a screen. Son, I know how crazy that sounds. And if you feel like playing skeptic, then you can leave an old man to his craziness. But I know what I saw, even if everyone's being hushing it up. And that stone he drew dropped. Jake even passed around the paper, and as it was being passed, it rolled around as the paper got tilted. None of us had any words for it. Hell, what was there to say? But he continued, drawing demonstration after demonstration for us. Stick figures and various pagans. And plays, doing everything from fighting each other to making the perfect human pyramids. and we all thought it was incredible. That was all the go-ahead he needed, he announced, that he planned to put a show to pay for rent and food, where he would draw anything the crowd members wanted. That we talked to some length about, and he eventually convinced us that would be safe. His drawings ethical, the practice lucrative and unique, and the attention would not go anywhere outside of the town's borders. Poor Jacob. If I had not been so swept up in the moment, I might have read the signs right there and then, and saved the sorry son of a bitch by snapping the terrible thing in half. But I was younger. We all were, and we saw no problem with encouraging him, with what we all saw as an incredible experience to be shared with everyone else. No, he didn't have big radio or television connections, mind you, and the internet wouldn't have come around for another decade. So, he did what all people and shoestring and budget do. He advertised his show with flyers. Flyers may not mean anything to you city folk, but in a small town, they gain a fair glance over from time to time. And what's more, Jacob managed to stick out by having little figures jump up and down and whatnot to get people's attention. His first show must have gotten nearly 60 or so people, probably a lot more than that. And his shows were fantastic. Someone would shout out a scene from a play or a comedy sketch, and Jake's hand would fly over a white wall like a bird. He'd been holding back when he made the stone. That's for damn sure. His illustrations were spot on, and he could make an incredible human figure in minutes. Come to think of it, I don't remember any of his scenes lasting more than 10 minutes or so to make. They were all really well done scenes too. Not only could you see the nice Charger castle, Jake would draw the castle's interior as well, like a wedding cake, split down the middle, so you could see the knight scale the walls, fight his way through the levels of the dungeon, fight back out with the princess, and make a leap jump off the castle's parapets onto his gateway halls, all in complete silence. Not realistic, no, but that was part of the appeal. None of us went in there expecting something real. When a scene or a sketch was finished, either the character would leave off the wall, or he'd cover the wall with white paint. This was good in a way. It gave these shows a time limit, so that when he'd finish with all of his 4 walls in the room, everyone knew the show was over until the paint dried. Jake, meanwhile, was changing in a bad way. I mentioned that upon his return, he had been extremely energetic. Well, that energy, that vitality of fervor, or whatever you wanna call it, it never left him. Not for an instant. Far from it. It seemed to grow in him. He enjoyed it all too much. His eyes grew wider. He slept greatly less over time. His statements and opinions more radical and frenzied. And though he was never a pushover, he was starting to make people nervous in his company. A month or 2 passed, and Jake's audience grew like wildfire. Nearly everyone in town paid to see Jake's art in action, and he had to rent out larger and larger places for them to sit. He now didn't stop after one scene was done. He moved directly on to the next, put on the next blank space on the wall, sometimes to the intriguing effects of causing scenes in the mingle, which the crowd loved. The subject matter got more wild and immoral. The monsters got more bizarre and creative. The fighters using more impossible weaponry, all for the sake of the crowd's interest. Jake got Stanley more indulgent, which we figured was from the money. And he became a drinker and womanizer, neither of which got rid of the vitality, by the way. Some of those women claimed that they'd been woken up in the middle of the night to see him scribbling with a stick on a drawing pad, and a gigantic grin on his face. And while most of them said that they assumed he was drawing them in nude, there's rumors that one or two of them got glances of the notepad. Those infamous few supposedly said that those drawings absolutely weren't nude pictures. But neither of them, whoever they are, will say what he was drawing. Don't bother looking for the notepads of flies, though. They're all gone now. I'm getting off track. Point is, he was hitting the bottle. And that's important, because it was that drinking would eventually ruin everything. On one night, one of his performances, as he walked in front of his cheering crowd, it was immediately apparent to everybody that he was completely drunk. I was in the front row, and I could smell the bourbon of him from 10 feet away. The show started. He went through a bunch of sketches and scenarios the crowd recommended, when at the end, someone asked that he draw himself. Everyone cheered the idea. I guess they'd been wondering what his creations thought of him, and he eventually obliged. No sooner had Jake finished connecting the final 2 lines on his code, and every single character across the vast expanse of wall all stopped and looked directly at the illustration. Lovers stopped kissing, clowns stopped laughing, robots stopped fighting pirates. Everything stopped and looked at the Jacob illustration. The crowd died almost instantly. I remember Jake's face at the moment, pale white, full of a terrible comprehension at his mistake, and looking desperately for the cans of white paint he'd forgotten to put out before the show. Everyone else, they were looking at the fake Jacob. The rest was an absolutely hellish pandemonium. People screamed and ran for the exits as Jacob's characters, both those currently on the wall, and those which had previously left before being covered up, ran out of their own exit, throwing pies, shooting lasers, blowing fire and poison, and the impossible. I was near enough to the exit to escape, and gave only one backward glance. The scene will haunt me forever. Jacob Emory was being dragged by his own creations, kicking, screaming, through the door his copy had made. The auditorium burned down, obviously enough, but I have no idea how many characters escaped, what happened to the fake Emory, or how many people died. The fire brought the fire department from the nearest cities, up to over 100 miles away. They in turn brought the police force, which brought the government, which hushed up everything. They took the flies, and any art Jake had made, and swore everyone to secrecy, or else life detained. The fire was blamed on a cigarette in the garbage during a baseball game, and we all eventually went with our own lives. Jacob was made to never have existed. In retrospect, I realize everything. Jacob hadn't been creating illustrations. Illustrations don't move, much less act or attack, they're just images people see. Shadows, make to look like real things. Jacob had been making life, actual, thinking things, in some alternate dimension, using her power It was never meant to fall in mortal hands. He got drunk on his power. His punishment was probably well deserved. Incidentally, the government screwed up in 2 different accounts. They did a damn good job silencing everyone. But proof remains. The ruins are still there, you know. The auditorium ruins. I hear they're going to start reconstructing it soon, which will wipe out any remaining evidence someone can definitely see. But I went back there once, several years after the fire. Just once, amidst the rubble covering the ash. I saw something squirming. It was Jacob Emory's hand on the wall. Exactly like it had been 3 years ago. Sweaty, but clasped, I remember. But it was constantly flailing, as if the body it was supposed to be attached to, still withering in flames. That was mistake number 1. Number 2 was those creations. Like I said, I don't know how many escaped, nor how many the government agents found or caught. But I will say only this. Those tall grass meadows in the outskirts of town? Don't go into them. Ever. You were asking about those white figures you've seen at night, right? This town does not have ghost stories.